We've got Sarah Lawrence, who's a social entrepreneur even, who supported Remain. Cheryl Hudson is next, and you supported Leave. Cheryl's a history lecturer. We've got Ian Hoskins next to Cheryl. He's a businessman, owns bars and is a Remainer. And next to Ian, we've got Eddie Bernard, who voted Leave, and he's a civil servant. Thank you all very much for coming along. Sarah, to you first of all, what was it about leaving that you felt was bad? Why did you vote Remain?
I voted Remain because historically Liverpool was potentially earmarked for managed decline. And you look at the city now and it's beautiful, and where we would have been standing was potentially a wasteland. And the EU not only contributed to rebuilding the city, but it's funded so many programmes that have helped people out of poverty. So I felt being part of the EU was really important for our communities and those who are most vulnerable and need help.
Cheryl, you obviously didn't feel the same way. Why did you vote to Leave?
Well, I could see good arguments on both sides, so I decided quite late that I would vote Leave. Really the arguments that persuaded me were arguments about sovereignty, not just national sovereignty, but popular sovereignty, which really depends on national sovereignty, and on a kind of reduction of the democratic deficit, because I think there is a real disconnect between the people of the country and the people who represent them in Parliament. And I think that people feel that their voices aren't being heard, and the referendum was an opportunity to make the voices heard to their Parliament in particular, but to the EU, which doesn't really have a kind of political community in the way that we do as a nation that can allow the people's voices to be heard. Also, the economic revival. I think we really need to kind of redesign our course for the economy. There are a lot of people who are left behind. There's a social justice element to that. So I think there are many reasons, and I know that there are good reasons to Remain too. Yeah. But I think that those were the ones that persuaded me.
You. So Ian, give us some of the reasons that you voted Remain.
Much the same way as Sarah, really. Essentially, you can see the EU funding all around you in Liverpool. We're a short distance away from the Echo Arena. They've got £50 million worth of EU funding. That was, there's a lot of kickstarts to the revival that kind of happened purely because of that. And Liverpool was a city that was left behind. We talked, before about Liverpool was a left behind city. That investment, I think it's upwards of £2 billion over 15 years. Now, that would have never come from central government for those projects, and it isn't just the big cash spending infrastructure projects. There's a lot of training and social projects as well. I think for me as a business owner, though, freedom of movement is a massive thing for me. Personally, and through EU nationals that work for me. I've been on the receiving end. I've worked in Ibiza and I've worked in France, and I've loved the fact that I could just get up, drop anchor, work somewhere for 3 months and have the same rights, have the same protections as you would anywhere in Europe. And I think that's an absolute gift that the EU have given us, and I think it's absolutely tragic that that's been sort of taken away now, just with this sort of willy-nilly approach that it seems to be all one way, that kind of, it's everyone coming to us. Well, it definitely works both ways. I know so many people who have been enriched by being able to kind of live, work and play all over Europe.
Eddie, as a civil servant, you'd be aware of a lot of that in terms of regulations and funding. None of that stopped you voting Leave?
No, I think for me, primarily, it was, the issue of sovereignty has already been raised, but primarily, I believe the EU is fundamentally a very undemocratic institution. I think that's been proven just recently with more recent events with other governments across Europe. The Greek government, for example, when they were voted in, they came at loggerheads with the EU. More recently, we've had the Italian government who've been unable to push through their own agenda economically because of the funding. They clashed with the EU over that. So for me, I think the EU, although it has been certainly of benefit for various regions, and Liverpool has benefited economically from being within the EU, I think fundamentally governments are restricted by what the EU is as an institution.
I think governments use that as the easiest get out going. I think, it's a failing of government just to blame the EU for every single problem that they have. And that's what I find really disgusting over the past the austerity project, which pretty much has led to where we are today, was something which was chosen. It was an ideology that was chosen by the Conservative government. And to kind of blame the EU for that, I think is absolutely terrible.
I think that's exactly why we need to leave the EU, because then they won't have anyone that they can blame, right? So then they just have to take, they will have to take responsibility for the political decisions being made in this country, that affect the people in this country. That's a really good argument for leaving, yeah?
The biggest concern for me is we've got 4.5 million children living in poverty. A 30-year-old woman tragically died in Liverpool last night because she was homeless. We're heading towards a no-Brexit deal if Theresa May's referendum isn't passed. And that will lead us to chaos. We've got lorries being parked. We just issued a contract to a ferry company with no ferries. And for me, that doesn't show a strong leadership. It doesn't show really sensible decision making. And I think we're at the point 2.5 years on that it is absolutely democratic for people to have the right information at hand, and it's the right thing that people are here allowed to make an informed decision, and I don't think we've had that. And I think it's laid bare at the moment, and people's opinions have changed.
Cheryl, what do you think of Theresa May's negotiations and the deal that is now on the table?
Well, I think the real problem was that there wasn't a party in Parliament that really believed in leaving the EU, but that really wanted to push that through. May herself was a Remainer and campaigned for that. I think she went into the negotiations with a kind of idea of damage limitation rather than seeing it as a great opportunity for democratic renewal, which it could have been, it had the potential to be that. And so she just wanted to limit the damage, and that was her kind of mindset. And so it doesn't really surprise me that this is the deal that she's come up with. I think there are some real problems with the deal. I can see a pragmatic case for kind of accepting it, because maybe that's the only way Brexit's going to happen. But I would prefer to leave without a deal, I think.
Ian, I mean, you're talking about your concerns being a bar owner and in terms of free movement and in terms of staffing. Under Theresa May's deal, that there are guarantees that should happen, that people will still be able to come and work here in the UK. Have you not had any of your concerns assuaged by what she's putting on the table at the moment?
No, they've been totally ramped up. Every anxiety that I've got with every day gets worse. While, if you've got a track record here over the past several years, okay, yes, you can pay your money and you can kind of apply to be a citizen here. The problem is that EU nationals are leaving in their droves. Already, from a personal perspective, recruitment is incredibly hard in the service industry. And there's other sectors such as nursing, the NHS, etc., manufacturing that have the same problems. The fact is that what worked really well is that you'd have, potentially sort of Spanish kids who would kind of finish school, want to learn English, would come over and enroll in an English course here, would work somewhere for 3-4 months. And there would be a real mutual benefit to that. And that's now sort of lost in this kind of rhetoric of, and even the fact that this kind of skills-based induction that you're going to have now, there was a threshold of £30,000 that, it's only going to be the most skilled that are allowed in. And I think, how democratic is that? What, people that want to come over and work for a few months and learn English and just experience a different culture can't do that anymore? I think it's an absolute shame.
So, Sarah, you're working alongside the construction industry. Has that, do you think, been affected so far?
I think it will be affected. You're going to look, the industry is already it's a volatile industry. You've seen massive collapse of Carillion, there's various other large construction companies under threat. You're looking at prices going up for materials, you're looking at the costs, and what that leads is a very unhealthy economic environment. You've got the construction industry, you've got the car industry. People are desperate for work, people want jobs, and to absolutely play devil's advocate or to play Russian roulette with people's opportunities, I think it's irresponsible. And I think for me, a no-deal Brexit would be putting the fate of so many vulnerable people into hands that I don't particularly trust at this moment in time to make the right decision for the general country.
Eddie, you support a no-deal Brexit. That is the option that you think is the best option at the moment. What can you say to Sarah to reassure her that actually, if we do crash out, it'll be fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily support a no-deal sort of Brexit, but I just wonder sometimes whether the scaremongering around a no-deal is exactly that, just scaremongering, because do we really know what the effects of a no-deal Brexit would actually be? Because we get so, as a member of the public, we get so many conflicting views, even from business. I've watched interviews on business.
Are fairly unanimous in the fact that virtually every type of business, large and small, do not want a no deal. I don't know any business that's gone on record to say that they'll be happy with a no deal.
I think for me, part of the thing has been the amount of propaganda in the campaigns. You know, it's clearly, you know, Vote Leave broke the law. There's been so much propaganda about funding, and that has muddied the waters. And I think that does a disservice to voters, because we deserve to have factual information to make an informed choice.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Sarah, Cheryl, Ian and Eddie, thank you very, very much for coming along here today. Liverpool, a Remain area. We've got the Fab Four. Wonder what they would have thought of all of this. Some people suggesting maybe they could have thrown Theresa May a little bit of help. Will she need to get by with a little help from her friends, maybe? Tomorrow, we're going to be down in Devon. We're going to be at a Leave town, a town that predominantly voted Leave. I imagine fishing will be an issue down there. Tourism, EU funding as well, likely to be something that people down there are talking about. But for now, from Liverpool, I'll hand you back to Adam.
Jane, thank you very much indeed. And this is All Out Politics. And next, we're going to be hearing a voice from the Midlands. The Mayor of the West Midlands will be joining me.